I'm Sarah, 22F, and I've been living with my dad, Jack, 51M, for the past 5 years since my parents divorced. My mom, Lisa, 49F, moved out when I was 17 after discovering my dad's affair with his coworker, Emma, 38F. The divorce was messy, and it tore our family apart in ways I'm still trying to understand. Growing up in our suburban home, I always thought my parents had a great relationship. They seemed happy, went on date nights, and we took family vacations every summer. I have fond memories of building sandcastles with Dad on the beach while Mom took photos, all of us laughing as the waves threatened to wash away our creations. But looking back, I realized there were signs of trouble that I missed as a kid, too young and naive to understand the complexities of adult relationships. Dad worked long hours at his accounting firm, often coming home late. He'd walk through the door after I was already in bed, his tie loosened and a weary smile on his face. Mom would get upset, her voice a hushed whisper as they argued in the kitchen, thinking I couldn't hear. But he'd always have an excuse about a big project or important client. I remember one night, peeking through the banister as Mom confronted him about missing my school play. "I'm sorry, Lisa," he said, running a hand through his graying hair. "You know how it is with tax season approaching." Mom just shook her head and walked away. When I was 16, things started to change. Dad was constantly on his phone, smiling at texts and being secretive. He'd take calls in the other room, his voice low and unfamiliar. Mom tried talking to him about it, but he brushed off her concerns. "It's just work stuff, honey," he'd say, pecking her on the cheek before heading out the door. But I could see the doubt in Mom's eyes, the way her smile didn't quite reach them anymore. Things came to a head on my 17th birthday. We were supposed to have a family dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant, the one where the owner knew us by name and always snuck me an extra cannoli. Dad called to say he had to work late, apologizing profusely and promising to make it up to me. I was disappointed but used to it by then. Mom, however, had reached her breaking point. "I'm going to surprise him at the office," she announced, grabbing her car keys and the birthday cake we'd picked up earlier. "He can't miss your birthday dinner, Sarah." "Not again." I'll never forget that night. Mom came home hours later, mascara streaking down her face, hands shaking as she threw some clothes in a suitcase. When I asked what happened, she just shook her head, unable to speak through her sobs. She hugged me tightly, whispering "I'm sorry" over and over before walking out the door. Dad showed up an hour later, acting like nothing was wrong. When I asked where Mom was, he lied and said she wasn't feeling well and went to stay with her sister. It took 2 days before he finally admitted the truth, sitting me down in the living room where we'd spent so many family movie nights. "Your mother caught me with someone else," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A coworker. Emma." The name felt like a slap in the face. I knew Emma, she'd been to our house for company picnics, always laughing a little too loudly at Dad's jokes. The next few months were awful. Mom moved in with her sister and filed for divorce. Dad tried to downplay the affair, saying it was a mistake and didn't mean anything. But the damage was done. I was furious with him for betraying our family, for shattering the image I had of him as the perfect father. I barely spoke to him for months, locking myself in my room and ignoring his attempts to talk. After the divorce was finalized, Mom got her own place in a nearby city. She asked if I wanted to live with her, but despite everything, I decided to stay with Dad. Part of it was practical. I was about to start college locally and didn't want to transfer schools. But there was also a part of me that didn't want to abandon him completely, even if I was still angry. Maybe it was the memories of the dad who taught me to ride a bike and checked under my bed for monsters, or maybe it was just the fear of more change in my already upended life. For the past 5 years, Dad and I have slowly rebuilt our relationship. It hasn't been easy, and there have been plenty of setbacks. There were nights of tense silences over dinner, awkward attempts at small talk that felt forced and unnatural. But gradually, things started to improve. He tried to make amends, spending more time with me and being more open about his feelings. We started having weekly movie nights again, though it felt strange with just the two of us on the couch where our family of 3 used to sit. I've learned to forgive him, even if I can't forget what he did. We've had long talks about trust and honesty, and I've seen genuine remorse in his eyes. He's been there for me through college stress and bad breakups, offering advice and comfort like the dad I remembered from childhood. Everything changed last month when Dad told me he was dating someone new. At first, I was cautiously optimistic. I want him to be happy, and I know it's been lonely for him since the divorce. He seemed nervous as he broached the subject over dinner, pushing his food around his plate. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you," he began, and I could hear the apprehension in his voice. "I've been seeing someone for a few months now, and it's getting serious. I nodded, encouraging him to continue. But then he dropped the bombshell. His new girlfriend was Emma, the same woman he had an affair with. The same woman who had been the catalyst for our family falling apart. I lost it. The room seemed to spin as I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I couldn't believe he would bring her back into our lives after everything that happened. We had a huge fight, our voices rising as years of pent-up anger and hurt spilled out. "How could you do this?" I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "Do you have any idea what this will do to Mom? To me? You're so selfish." Dad tried to explain that they had reconnected recently and things were different now, but I didn't want to hear it. All I could think about was Mom's face that night she came home from his office, the pain in her eyes that I still saw sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking. I was so angry that I did something I now regret. I stormed up to my room and opened my laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard as I poured out my frustration in a social media post. I called out Dad and Emma for their affair and how they were getting back together, including details about how they originally met and how it destroyed our family. It was all the things I'd wanted to scream from the rooftops when I was 17, finally finding an outlet. The post blew up faster than I could have imagined. Friends and family started commenting and sharing it, expressions of shock and support flooding my notifications. Dad's phone was blowing up with messages from people who saw my post. When he came to my room, his face was a mix of hurt and fury I'd never seen before. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he asked, his voice shaking. "You had no right to air our family's dirty laundry online like that." I took down the post after a few hours, but the damage was done. Screenshots had already been taken and shared. Dad and I haven't spoken in weeks. He's hurt and embarrassed, and I feel guilty for lashing out the way I did. But I also still feel angry and betrayed that he would bring Emma back into our lives. Now I'm left wondering if I went too far. I know Dad is an adult and can date who he wants, but I can't help feeling like this is a huge slap in the face to me and Mom. The thought of having to see Emma at family gatherings or holidays makes my stomach churn. But I also worry that I've irreparably damaged my relationship with Dad, just when we were finally getting to a good place. So, Reddit, Ida for exposing my dad's affair and refusing to accept his relationship with Emma? I'm torn between standing my ground and trying to salvage what's left of my family. Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1, it's been about a month since my original post, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their comments and advice. It's given me a lot to think about, even if some of it was hard to hear. After taking some time to cool off, Dad and I finally sat down to talk. It was a long, emotional conversation that lasted well into the night. We met at a neutral location, a small coffee shop downtown where the soft jazz music and dim lighting seemed at odds with the tension between us. Dad arrived first, and I could see the nervousness in his posture as I walked in. He stood up, arms awkwardly at his sides like he wasn't sure whether to hug me or not. We settled for a stiff nod before sitting down, the small table between us feeling like a chasm. He started by apologizing for blindsiding me with the news about Emma. "I should have handled it better," he admitted, his fingers tapping an anxious rhythm on his coffee cup. "I was so worried about how you'd react that I ended up making it worse." I nodded, taking a sip of my own drink to buy time before responding. "I'm sorry too," I finally said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. Posting about it on social media was immature. I was hurt and angry, but that doesn't excuse it. We talked for hours, peeling back layers of hurt and misunderstanding that had built up over the years. Dad explained that he and Emma had run into each other at this very coffee shop about 6 months ago. They started talking and realized they still had feelings for each other. He insisted that nothing happened while Emma was still married. She divorced her husband 2 years ago, and they only started dating recently. "I know it's hard for you to understand," he said, leaning forward with an earnestness I hadn't seen in years. "But Emma and we've both changed. We've grown. What happened before was wrong, and we both know that. But this feels different." I listened, trying to keep an open mind even as old anger bubbled up inside me. When he finished, I took a deep breath and told him how I really felt. How hurt and betrayed I felt, not just by him dating Emma, but by the whole situation. The affair had a huge impact on me, leaving scars that were still healing. I opened up about how it affected my own relationships and how I've struggled to commit to anyone for fear of being cheated on. I told him about the guy I'd been seeing last year, how I ended things when they started getting serious because I was terrified of getting hurt. Every time he worked late or didn't answer a text right away, I imagined the worst, I confessed, wiping away a tear. I couldn't trust him, even though he never gave me a reason not to. "And that's on me, but it's also because of what happened with you and Mom." Dad listened, really listened, maybe for the first time since this all began. I saw the moment it hit him, the full weight of how his actions had affected me. He reached across the table, hesitating before gently taking my hand. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I never meant to hurt you like this. I was selfish and stupid, and I've regretted it every day since. He told me he's been going to individual counseling to work on himself and understand why he made the choices he did. It was strange to hear my dad talk about therapy. He'd always been the type to insist he could handle things on his own. But I could see the change in him, a vulnerability that hadn't been there before. We talked about Mom and how this would affect her. Dad agreed to tell her about his relationship with Emma before she heard it from someone else. I owe her that much, he said, running a hand through his hair. And I'll make it clear that this doesn't change anything about our past or the mistakes I made. He also promised to be mindful of how he introduces Emma into our lives and not to rush things. We agreed that if and when I do meet her, it will be on my terms and timeline. While I'm still not thrilled about the situation, I appreciate Dad's willingness to talk things through. We agreed to keep working on our communication and to be honest with each other moving forward. It feels like a small step, but an important one. The hardest part of all this has been dealing with the fallout from my social media post. Some family members are still upset, sending passive-aggressive messages or bringing it up at every opportunity. Dad's reputation at work took a hit. Apparently, some clients saw the post and have been hesitant to work with him. I feel terrible about it and have been trying to make amends. I've reached out to people individually to apologize and explain that I acted out of anger. Most have been understanding, but there's still tension at family gatherings. Aunt Karen, in particular, seems to take every opportunity to make snide comments about airing dirty laundry. I also had a long talk with Mom. She was understandably upset when she heard about Dad and Emma, but she's been incredibly supportive of me. We met for lunch at her favorite sushi place, and I braced myself for her reaction. To my surprise, she was calm as I explained the situation. Oh, honey, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I know this must be so hard for you. She reminded me that their relationship is no longer my responsibility to manage and that I need to focus on my own healing. Your father and I made our choices, she said, a hint of sadness in her eyes. Now we all have to live with the consequences. But that doesn't mean you have to carry that burden. Moving forward, I'm working on setting better boundaries with Dad. I've made it clear that while I'm willing to work on our relationship, I won't be a go-between for him and Emma or help facilitate their relationship in any way. It's going to be a delicate balance, but I'm determined to try. It's going to take time, but I'm cautiously optimistic that we can find a way forward. I'm focusing on my own life, my job at the marketing firm, my friends, and my hobbies. I've started taking a pottery class on weekends, finding something calming in the act of shaping clay on the wheel. I've also started journaling to help process my feelings about everything. It's been helpful to get my thoughts out on paper, to see the progress, and sometimes setbacks, as I work through this complicated situation. Thank you again to everyone who offered advice and support. It's been a difficult time, but I'm taking it one day at a time. I know there will be more challenges ahead, but for now, I'm trying to focus on the small victories and the hope that someday, this will all feel like a distant memory. Update 2. It's been another month, and I wanted to provide another update on the situation with my dad and Emma. Things have taken an unexpected turn, and I'm struggling to process it all. Last week, I finally agreed to meet Emma for dinner with my dad. I was nervous and honestly dreading it, but I figured it was time to at least give her a chance. We met at a neutral restaurant, a new Thai place downtown that none of us had been to before. I arrived first, my stomach in knots as I waited at the table, fidgeting with my napkin. When Dad and Emma walked in, I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Emma looked different than I remembered, older, more subdued. She gave me a hesitant smile as they sat down, and I noticed her hand shaking slightly as she picked up the menu. At first, things were awkwardly polite. We made small talk about the weather and the restaurant's decor, carefully avoiding any mention of the past. But as the evening went on and we moved from appetizers to main courses, Emma started sharing more about her background and her side of the story. She told me about her unhappy marriage, how she and my dad had initially just been friends who confided in each other. I know it doesn't excuse what we did, she said, her eyes welling up with tears. But I want you to know that it wasn't some frivolous thing. We both made terrible mistakes, and we've spent years trying to make amends. I listened, trying to keep an open mind even as old hurt and anger bubbled up inside me. But what really threw me for a loop was when Emma revealed that she has a daughter, Lily, 15F, from her previous marriage. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking slightly as she pulled up a photo. "This is Lily," she said, turning the phone towards me. My heart stopped. The girl in the photo could have been my twin at that age. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same slightly crooked smile. It was like looking at an old-school photo of myself. I started doing the math in my head, a horrible suspicion forming in my mind. Lily would have been born around the time my dad started working longer hours, around the time the distance between him and Mom began to grow. The silence at the table was deafening. I looked up from the phone to see Dad's face pale, his eyes darting between me and Emma. In that moment, I knew. Is she? I couldn't even finish the sentence, my voice barely above a whisper. Dad cleared his throat, his hand shaking as he reached for his water glass. Sarah, He started, then stopped, looking helplessly at Emma. Yes, Emma said softly, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and regret. Lily is Jack's daughter. Your half-sister. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Not only had my dad been lying about the length and extent of his affair, but I had a half-sister I never knew about. A sister who had grown up without knowing me, without knowing the truth about her father. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need some air, I mumbled, barely registering the concerned looks from nearby diners as I stumbled towards the exit. Outside, the cool night air did little to clear my head. I leaned against the brick wall of the restaurant, trying to make sense of this new reality. Dad came out a few minutes later, his face etched with worry and guilt. Sarah, please, he began, reaching out towards me. I flinched away, wrapping my arms around myself. How long? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. How long have you known about her? Dad's shoulders slumped. Since before she was born, he admitted. Emma told me she was pregnant, and I panicked. I convinced myself that staying with our family was the right thing to do. I thought I could just forget about it, move on. I laughed bitterly. Move on? While you had another child out there? While you lied to all of us for years? I know I messed up, Dad said, his voice breaking. I've made so many mistakes, hurt so many people. I thought I was protecting everyone, but I was just being a coward. I shook my head, unable to process it all. I can't do this right now, I said, pulling out my phone to call a ride. I need time to think. As I waited for my car, Emma came out. She looked like she wanted to say something, but seemed to think better of it. Instead, she handed me a folded piece of paper. It's my number, she said quietly. And Lily's email address. If you ever want to talk or reach out to her. It's up to you. I took the paper automatically, shoving it into my pocket as my ride pulled up. I left without another word, my mind reeling. That was a week ago. I've been avoiding Dad's calls and messages ever since. I'm hurt, angry, and feeling betrayed all over again. Just when I thought we were making progress, this bombshell drops and shatters everything I thought I knew about my family. I'm also struggling with my feelings about Lily. On one hand, she's an innocent party in all this and my sister. There's a part of me that's curious about her, that wonders what she's like and if we have anything in common beyond our looks. On the other hand, her existence represents my dad's betrayal, a physical reminder of the lies that tore our family apart. I called Mom to tell her what I found out. She was shocked but not entirely surprised. I had suspicions years ago, she admitted, her voice tired. But your father always had explanations, and I wanted so badly to believe him. Hearing her pain reopened old wounds for both of us. Right now, I'm taking some time to myself to process everything. I've told Dad I need space and not to contact me for a while. Emma sent me a long email apologizing and asking to talk, but I'm not ready for that yet. The folded paper with Lily's email address sits on my desk, both tempting and terrifying. I've drafted a dozen messages to her in my head, but I can't bring myself to actually write anything. What would I even say? Hi, I'm your long-lost half-sister, surprise. I'm feeling lost and unsure of how to move forward. The trust I had been rebuilding with my dad is shattered, and I don't know if I can ever fully trust him again. At the same time, I'm curious about Lily and what this means for my family dynamic going forward. Any advice on how to handle this situation would be appreciated. I'm trying to take things one day at a time, but it feels like every time I think I've got a handle on things, another curveball comes my way. Update 3. It's been 6 weeks since my last update, and I'm still trying to navigate this complex situation. After taking some time to process everything, I decided to reach out to Lily. It was a decision I agonized over for days, writing and rewriting a simple email until my finger hovered over the send button for what felt like hours. We met for coffee last week at a small cafe halfway between our towns. I got there early, my nerves making me jittery as I waited, wondering if I'd recognize her. When she walked in, it was like looking in a mirror. We have the same walk, the same way of tucking our hair behind our ears when we're nervous. Hi, she said softly, sliding into the seat across from me. I'm Lily. The conversation started awkwardly, both of us unsure how to bridge the gap of years and secrets between us. But as we talked, sharing stories about our childhoods and discovering we have a lot in common, things began to feel more natural. Lily knew about me and had apparently been wanting to meet me for years. She found out about our connection when she was 12 and overheard an argument between her parents. I always wanted a sister, she admitted, stirring her latte absently. When I found out I actually had one. It was like something out of a movie. We talked for hours, losing track of time as we compared notes on our lives. It was surreal to see so many of my own mannerisms and features reflected in her, the way she scrunched her nose when she laughed, the same terrible pun humor that always made Mom roll her eyes. Despite the circumstances, I found myself genuinely liking Lily. There's a spark in her, a resilience that I admire. She's been carrying this secret for years, navigating a complex family situation with a grace that I'm not sure I would have had at her age. As for Dad, we've had several long, difficult conversations. He's apologized profusely and is trying to make amends, but I'm still having trouble trusting him. The depth of his deception, the years of lies, it's a lot to process. He's offered to go to family counseling together, which I'm considering. Part of me wants to just walk away, to cut ties and start fresh. But there's another part, the part that remembers the dad who taught me to ride a bike and stayed up all night helping me with science fair projects, that wants to find a way forward. Emma has kept her distance, respecting my need for space. She did send me a heartfelt letter explaining her side of things and expressing hope that someday we might have a relationship. I'm not ready for that yet, but I appreciate her giving me time. My mom has been my rock through all of this. When I told her about meeting Lily, I expected anger or resentment. Instead, she surprised me with her compassion. She's just a child, Mom said, her voice gentle. None of this is her fault. And punishing her for your father's mistakes won't change the past. Mom's strength and grace in handling this situation have been inspiring. She's encouraged me to get to know Lily, saying that having a relationship with my sister doesn't diminish my love for her or excuse Dad's actions. Moving forward, I'm taking things day by day. Lily and I have plans to meet up again next week, and I'm cautiously excited about building a relationship with her. As for Dad and Emma, I'm still keeping them at arm's length while I figure out how I feel. This whole experience has taught me a lot about forgiveness, family, and the complexities of relationships. While I'm still hurt and angry at times, I'm also trying to find a way forward that allows for healing and growth. It's not easy, and there are days when I still feel overwhelmed by it all. But I'm hopeful that something positive can come out of all this pain and upheaval.